Hi, my name's Noah Altschul. I'm an artist, programmer, etc. I've been on a sort of journey of making 3D printed things and trying to sell files for what I've made online. Since last year, I've been making 3D printed membrane clarinets like this. This is what it sounds like. I've also got this model that sounds more or less the same. And recently I made this that has a more, I don't know, it does more or less the same thing, but different form factor. And this is the most recent one, which there was some layer shifts. So this one doesn't play as well as the last one. I'll need to print it out again. But the big update here is all of the finger holes are aligned down the middle. I'd like to play it for you, but it is what it is. Anyway, someone else with a much bigger channel and a bigger audience happened to start selling 3D printed membrane clarinets and claiming that they came up with that all on their own. And they're charging $100 each. So if you've seen those and thought, wow, I'd really like one of those, but it's just too expensive for me, you're in luck, because that guy's my only competition, and my only recourse now is to link to the flutes I've designed, and you know what? I'll show you in this video how you can make your own. You know, maybe you're one of these people who thinks, well, that's nice, but I don't know how to 3D print anything or 3D model anything, so I'd rather just have a finished product. I will walk you through every step in this video of how to get, you know, you have options. If you have no experience, you can use a website to order a 3D print in the mail, or chances are your local library has a 3D printer. Most likely that's available to use. So if you understand how to use a slicer, which is the program that translates the 3D model file into instructions for a 3D printer, you can make one of these yourself. I have all of these models available on my Gumroad. You can download if you just want one of those. Or alternatively, you can learn how to make them from me in this video and make your own. Let's get started. Okay, this is my first time trying to do anything like this, but this is the standard Blender scene. It opens with a camera, a light, and a cube. If you're modeling for 3D printing, you don't really have to worry about the camera or the light. You could delete them if you want. But so this is the default cube. If you press N, you select this and press N, or we go over here, you see the information, its location, its rotation, its scale, its dimensions. I have this set up where 1 unit, so this cube is 2 by 2 by 2, is equal to 1 millimeter. So this is 2 millimeters wide, 2 millimeters tall. When I import it into the slicer, I'm not the best modeler. I learned years ago from a video from a creator called Quill18 Creates. His video's still on YouTube if you want it, and I think it's the one that's using Blender and Unity to model things. But this is just a basic run through. If you press spacebar, You have a drop down menu, and you can type add, and you can pull up different primitives. So you can add a cube, make sure it's the mesh, not the empty. You can add a cylinder, you can add a sphere, either a icosphere or a UV sphere. You know, add torus, you can add, there's a lot. Blender is great. It's very robust, it's free. For the purposes of this video, we're mostly going to be using cubes and cylinders because this is a video on how to make flutes. So let's get rid of this. So it's over here because I pressed left click in the scene and that sets the cursor. But if I hit space, I can put, say, snap cursor to world origin, and then with the cylinder selected, I can say snap selection to cursor, and that brings it back. Let's delete this. You hit X, then delete. And let's say add cylinder again. And if you go over here to the bottom left, now you have all of these options. So if I wanted to make it smoother, I could say give it 128 faces. If I want a perfectly, close to perfectly round cylinder, that's what I'll do. Radius, like it says, that's how wide it is. Depth is how tall it is. And all these things you can adjust. Another thing you can do is, let's say you want a hexagonal cylinder. You say vertices 6, there you go. It has 6 sides. If you want an octagonal one, say 8. For a lot of my flutes recently, I've been using 8-sided exterior walls just because they pack together nicely. But okay, so something you need to know when 3D modeling for 3D printing is when you take whatever file that you save in Blender or whatever 3D modeling program and you feed it into the slicer, it has to translate that model file into instructions for the 3D printer. So that means it needs to understand the internal and external geometry. So for just a standard cube, if you import this into a slicer, it gets this. It says, okay, all of the walls are connected. There's a top and a bottom. There's, sides. If I were to go into edit mode here, and you can choose between vertices, edges, faces. Let's say I grab these 2 faces and I hit X and I delete those faces. And I swap back to object mode. It doesn't know what this is. It doesn't know what to do with this because this doesn't have an understandable internal and external geometry. Right? A computer's going to look at this and say, you want a wall that's 0 millimeters wide and a bottom that's 0 millimeters tall and a top that's 0. It doesn't work. Yeah. So the difference between object mode and edit mode is, I guess if I'd had to explain it, it's, object mode is where you add whatever primitives you need, and then if you need to go into detail, you hit tab and enter edit mode and you have more control. If you're coming at this from like an artist's point of view, a sculptor's point of view, you are probably thinking, okay, if I'm like making a sculpture in real life with physical materials, if I'm working with clay, that's the additive method. I'm adding bits of clay together to form a larger design or object. If I'm starting with something like marble and I'm chiseling away at it, then that's the subtractive method. So how do you do that in Blender? Well, let's start with the additive method. If you don't have overlapping faces, I'm going to hit Shift D and G, Y to move it, and then hit 2. I could select this cube, hit Shift, right click this cube, and then press Control J. And that joins these two together. And that looks pretty seamless because where one face ends, the other one begins. If I hit edit mode, you can see that. Situationally, that's fine if you're 3D printing stuff, but it's not ideal. And that's because this is now a wall inside the internal space. So let's scale this up a little. Let's scale this on the Y. And if I select this and hit Control J, again, all of these walls still exist on the inside of this cube. So if it were to print this, it would have to, try to understand that. But if we take this cube, and do either way, but we go over here to this little blue wrench, the modifiers tab, and we go to Boolean, and we select Union. We take this eyedropper and we select this other cube, and then we hit apply. Then I'll select this one and hide it. I'll press H to hide. Now, when we look inside of this, the internal geometry understands, or it's more clear, right? It said, okay, look at the overlapping volumes and join them together, but remove where they intersect. So generally speaking, that's better for joining two overlapping volumes when 3D printing. Additionally, I'm hitting Command Z to undo. The subtractive method is more or less the same. You instead of union, you hit difference. And you select the object you want to subtract, and then you can hit Command A or apply. And now if I hide this, it has subtracted all of the area, the volume that intersected with that other object. That's very useful. There is a limit, like, to how many Boolean modifiers you can apply to a given object. But, for simple shapes, it usually works out pretty well. Okay, what else do I want to talk about? So, let's get away from cubes and go back to cylinders. What if I have a, let's make this 50, no, that's radius. Let's make this, whatever, make it 3. I'll make the depth 40. Okay, so let's say I have this cylinder and I want to make this into a tube for a flute. And well, your first thought is probably, well, you just showed me how to do this. All you need to do is take this cylinder, hit Shift D, hit S to scale, and you can hit X, Y, or Z to scale it along any axis, or you can hit Control Z, or what is it? Shift Z, yes. So Shift Z, Shift X, Shift Y will exclude one axis and scale it along the other two. So if you hit Shift Z, then it scales this along the X and Y while maintaining the same Z. So if we want to cut out the interior of this larger cylinder, we'll do that, and then we'll scale it on the Z a little bit so that it does that, and then we'll take a Boolean and we'll subtract it and hit Command A. Then we can hide this and you can see we've got a tube. Great. What if we wanted to bend this tube and make a round object out of it? So the way we do that is you select it, you go into edit mode, you grab an edge, and then you hit Control R to make a loop cut, and then you can either scroll on your scroll wheel or you can punch in the number of loop cuts you want. I'll say 180, hit left click and then right click to, and then you have these options over here if you want to adjust them. With that done, now it has an understanding of where to bend the object. If I go to the modifier tab and I go to simple deform, you can see that looks kind of crazy. That's the twist version. If I go to bend, then I can select an axis. You just use the x-axis, and then this is the angle of the bend. So if I say bend it 180 degrees, it does just that. And now we have a cylinder that has been bent into a kind of C shape. And now you're saying, okay, well, it still has these faces, and how do I remove that, the internal, so that it can operate as a flute? So what you're going to want to do is you add your cylinder, you go into edit mode, Control R, add however many loop cuts you want. Now what you need to do is make another cylinder that has the same depth, the same height, but a different radius. So let's say that had a radius of 3. Let's say this one's going to have a radius of 1.5. And again, you want it to have the same depth because when you bend it, you want it to be have the same shape. So let's take this one. We've added those loop cuts. We'll go to simple deform, bend 180, apply. Now we'll go to this one, hit Control R, 180, left click, right click, tab, simple deform, bend 180, apply. And now we'll go into edit mode, go to the faces tab, grab this face, shift right click this face, and then we'll hit E to extrude, and then we'll press Y to say extrude along the Y. And then we go back here and we'll do a Boolean difference, or we select this and we hit apply. I'll just hit Command A because it's faster. And now when we remove that, it has the geometry we're looking for. If I go into, so if I hit Z, I can switch between looking at the view in a rendered state. That's like if you have textures or colors applied. Material preview, similar. Right now it's in solid. We'll go to wireframe, and you can see it is a hollowed out tube. And that's how you do that. We'll go back to solid, just more pleasant to look at. Okay, so what if we want this to extend into another tube? Well, for one, we can grab these faces
these flat faces on the ends, and we can hit E and press Y to extrude, and we can do that. What if we want to connect them to another object or another tube? So to do that, what I'm gonna do is here I'll hit Shift D, RZ 180, GY. Okay, so let's say we have two faces and we want to connect this face to this face. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Shift right click to select both, then I'll hit Control J to join them together, then I'll enter edit mode, and I'm going to hit X to delete all of these faces. So what we need to do next is we want to say, hey, take this ring of edges and this ring of edges and join them together, like bridge that gap. So the way we'll do that is grab one of these edges, hit space, type select edge loops, and it auto completes, so you don't have to type the whole thing. You can just type in select edge, and then then you have that option. Okay, now we have all of that selected. We'll go to the other edge we want to, so I'll hit Shift right click to grab that other edge, and then I'll press space. It saved that selection from before, so we're going to say select those edge loops. Great, now we have both edge loops selected. Well, now we're going to press space and press bridge. We're going to select bridge edge loops, and just like that. And this looks clean because these both have 128 faces or edges to connect, so it's a one-to-one. But if you had one that had 10 faces and another that had 100, it would do the work to interpolate that and make it as smooth as possible. And you have more options down here. Situationally, you might need to play around with that, but if it's just a one-to-one kind of situation, it's not necessary. So that's that. Now let's select the outer rim, and again we'll hit select edge loops, and then do the same for this side, select edge loops, and then bridge edge loops. And if I hit Z, go to wireframe, it has an understandable internal and external geometry now. It gets, okay, that's this is the interior space, this is the interior wall, this is the exterior wall. If I press tab to go back to object mode, a slicer still wouldn't know what to do with this because I need to do the same for these. This is just an example. This is obviously this wouldn't work as a flute, but if I go to open recent and go to, I'll show you one I've been working on recently. This is more complicated, obviously, but it's this is how I made this. Is I figured out how to get these shapes to look how I wanted. The way this works, this flute or membrane clarinet or whatever you want to call it, is you take a balloon or a rubber glove or a saran wrap or whatever you have, and you pull it tightly along this top edge, and then you secure it with, you use a rubber band, you could use a zip tie. I use electrical tape because it's easy, it works good enough. And if I hit wireframe, you can see this top tube comes down, it goes here, continues here, and then it follows the rest of this shape comes back up, and I've separated this into a top and bottom kind of piece. So if I go back to solid, you can select this, edit mode. This is where it continues, and this is the first finger hole. That's going to be produce the highest note, and then this is the subsequent one, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, the eighth. And yeah, so that is, and you can see this had probably 128 faces, edges along this side, and this only had 8. So when I bridged these two together, it interpolated, it figured out what's the smoothest way to do that, and you get this. Is there a smoother way to do that? Probably. I didn't mind, for my needs, this got the job done. So if you bought this file from me and you wanted to edit it, to change the pitch, the tuning, how would you do that? Because this, well, you would need to grab one of these arches and move it up or move it down, and that could take a while. If you hit B, or okay, so if you, all you know how to do is right click a face and then hit shift and right click to select another face, you're going to be here all day. If you hit shift and command, then you select all the faces from one to the other. But again, this is 180 faces just here, another 180 here, another 180. You're going to be here all day. So one way to select many faces at once is to hit B to box select, and then you drag. You can select as many faces as you want, but that's still not the best way to go about doing this, because if I hit wireframe, you can see just how many faces are inside of this. So if I hit B and then I hit the middle button of my mouse where the control wheel is and I drag, I can deselect selected faces. So the best way to select one of these arches and move it up and down is actually to hit A to select all of these faces, and then press Z to go into the wireframe mode. And then you hit B, box select, and middle mouse button to deselect all of the faces you don't want. And this way you can select all of these faces, all of the relevant faces here, much quicker. And we're just gonna go, don't want those, don't want those. Finally, we do not want those. If I go back into solid mode, you can see we've got all of these edges that we want and none of the ones that we don't. And then if I hit G, Z, I can bring it up, and that will lower the tone of the note that comes out when you lift your finger off of the second finger hole, or I can press G, Z, and pull it down, and that will raise the note of the subsequent finger hole. And if I hit Command Z and the Command Z again, I can undo all of that. So that's how you would edit this design. If you bought it from me, I think I'd probably gonna put it on my site for $5, like all my other designs. And if you say, well, I want this bit, but I don't want any of this because I have my own design I want to make, I'll put up the model for just up to here. That's easy enough. If I open this one, we'll say don't save here. yeah, I can grab this, and you can, here, I'll delete all of these faces from it, and you can have this as like a starting point. So this is the mouthpiece, this is the thing that produces the sound, and you can make your own flute from this as just a jumping off point. Something I've noticed from making a lot of these is the larger you make this end, the louder it's going to be. And the internal space of the flute, the larger this is, the how do I say this? The kind of, so it has to do with air pressure, right? So the smaller this internal tube space is, the sooner it can reach low notes. Like if this is internal of, I think this is a 10 millimeter cylinder cut out from this. If you made it 5 millimeters, it would reach lower notes sooner, but it would be more difficult to play because you have to breathe harder into here to get the air to travel. So, for a long time, what I was using was a 15 millimeter external wall and an 11 millimeter internal. This is a little bit smaller. This is 14 millimeters with an 11, I think a 10 millimeter internal. And again, the octagonal shape, that means these can be packed together pretty tightly. One thing you do have to know about that is, here I'll say add a cylinder, and we'll say it's going to have 8 edges and a radius of 10 and a depth of 50. When you bend this, it's not going to look right. When you enter tab mode and add those loop cuts, first thing you want to do with all of these selected is hit R to rotate, Z to rotate along the Z axis, and to get the flat edge that we want, we're going to say rotate it 22.5 degrees. And now it has this shape that we want. Now if I rotate it 90 degrees on the Y, it has a flat face on the top and the bottom. And another thing you have to know about when 3D modeling for 3D printing is you have to be aware of how do things sit on the build plate. So everything that is flat on the build plate has to have the same Z location. If I select this, I go into tab mode, I grab this face, you can see this is more or less 0. If it's like 0.00009, it's going to be understood by the slicer to be 0. Always select global, not local. Local is like relative to the object. Global is like in the entire space. Where is it? And just as a sort of way to make things easier, I always try to make the bottom face be 0, just so I don't have to remember, is it -13, is it 5, is it whatever. Just and another way you can manage that is if you have whatever objects in your scene, we'll say snap the cursor to the world origin, add a cube mesh, make it the size of an Ender 3 build plate is 22 centimeters, so that would be 220 millimeters. And then we're going to grab this and we're going to say move it half of that down, so say -110. And now we have an object that represents the build plate that if we need to, let's say this is RY90. Let's say this is in our scene, G, Shift, Z to move it around. And one way we could make sure this is flat up and down on the build plate is move it, but for whatever reason, if we wanted to, if we said, hey, actually, we like where it is, we just want to remove the volume that's below the build plate, we can just go Boolean difference, select this cube, and it will get rid of all of that. So maybe that's not. Let me explain that another way. Let's say snap cursor to selected, and we'll just delete that, and we'll add a cylinder. We'll say, and give it a vertices of 64 and RY90. Okay, this object can't be printed like this on the build plate because it doesn't have a flat edge on the bottom. But if I grab it and now it's intersecting here, go to Boolean difference, grab this, apply. Now it has this face where it won't be the, just the actual, physical material being printed. This is probably going to sag a little bit if there's no supports, but this can be 3D printed. I can send this object to the slicer if I wanted to. Put that through, get a G-code, put that in the 3D printer, and get an object that looks more or less like this. Okay, so once you have whatever 3D object that you want, you're satisfied with, you might notice that a general rule of thumb for 3D printing is it can the 3D printer can handle angles of anything 45 degrees or over. So that's why I like to use octagonal cylinders, this is a 45 degree angle. If it was higher than that, it's fine. Like if it's straight up and down, a 90 degree angle. If it's less than 45, if it's half of that, if it's 22.5, right? Then that starts getting into the territory of the slicer saying, hey, that's not like a doable object, because that's going to droop as the plastic is extruded. That's going to be difficult to do. So here, where I have this arch, this needs to print a more or less flat, 180 degree, whatever you want to call it, edge in 3D space. So to account for that, I made this object that is designed to be a support. And in Cura, in other slicers too, you can import objects and just say, hey, print this as support. I'll show you that now. And so that's what these two objects are. These are simple cubes. I have my slicer set to print in 0.3 millimeters. So these are both 0.1 millimeters tall. So it will just ignore these completely when it actually goes to print. But the way it works is this cube and this cube are saved as the same object, but they're deleted, and then this object and this cube are saved in the same file. So what I would do is I'd say save, or I'd export as STL, and then I'd click that and get my STL, and then I would delete this object and this object, and take this and say file, export, STL, and I would save this larger piece as the solid object, and I would select this piece as the support object. Undo is Command Z, redo is Command Shift Z. So I'll go into Cura now and show you what that looks like. So this is a slicer. There's different slicers. You can add whatever model of 3D printer you have or have access to. I have this took a little like a tutorial to do, but this is I have two printers. This is for the the FlashForge Creator Pro 2. The big benefit is it has two hot ends, so we can print in two materials, but for most of my models, I just use an Ender 3 V2. This is the build plate and volume available. So if I go to File, Open Files, and I open this, this is that flute design that I just showed you, and you can see the red areas. It's saying that could be a trouble. That could be a problem for when you print. These are highlighted in red to say, hey, that's like gonna cause an issue just because of the limitations of the printer. So if I go here and I get my support object, and I'm gonna set its position to 0. It's still not right. I'm gonna grab this and move it. So this is what these squares are for. It's just for positioning. I'm gonna try to get it as close to that as possible. And in here, in per model settings, I'm gonna say print as support, and that changes the texture of it, how it's shown. It's got this stripy pattern, and changes this to a checker. If I go here, I can grab this, and I can grab and I have to select move or press T, and I can drag it. That looks pretty good. I can also adjust the X and Y, the numbers here. So if I change minus 34.7201 to minus 34.73 and I hit enter, it'll move it a little bit to the right. If I say 0.71, it moves it to the left. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but this is pretty close. You know, you can zoom in and get it as close as you need it to be. And, you know, don't pull your hair out. You can just eyeball it. That's good enough, I think. If we look over here, yeah, that looks pretty good. So what that means is when this goes to print on the 3D printer, all of this, the solid object will print in, these are the print settings. So I have it set to 0.3 layer height because that'll help it go faster. It'll look, you know, you can see the layer lines, but for this model, it's not important, or it's not as important. The wall thickness, that means the exterior walls, how much material and how many wall lines, and top and bottom thickness. If you ever forget this, you can just Google what are the best settings for 3D printing a flute in a slicer, and this is more or less what it will tell you to do. I use PLA for most things. That means printing temperature of 220, build plate temperature of 60. Print speed of 50 millimeters a second. Infill density is how much material to print within the internal geometry, and 20% is good enough for most things. If I've seen people make 3D printed instruments that are dependent on air pressure, and they think, oh, I need to give it 100% infill density. You don't. You need to adjust the wall thickness and the top and bottom thickness so that the important parts are more or less solid. Like, because the flute walls, the external one is 14 and the internal one is 10 millimeters, that means the walls are 2 millimeters thick. So that's like all of the relevant parts are being printed 100% more, infill anyway, but spaces where there's more volume, like here, it's at 20% infill. So if I take this, I hit slice, then it's going from the bottom to the top, layer by layer, slicing it into instructions for the 3D printer. And then you'll hit save to disk. You can save it to whatever folder. I just save it to the desktop, give it whatever name, and you will save it as a gcode file. And with that, you can take whatever .gcode file. If you have a 3D printer, you then put it on your SD card and then take it from your computer to your printer, put the SD card into the printer, and go from there. If you're completely new to 3D printing and you don't know, what to do, you have options. As I said earlier in the video, there are websites where you can give them the model file and tell them to print it and send it to you in the mail. And additionally, you probably have access at your local library to a 3D printer, and you can load in whatever model file you need there. Probably somebody there has experience with that machine and can help you set it up. Again, I'm not going to spend all the time of how to, my 3D printers are actually pretty old by this point. They require manual bed leveling and maintenance and all this stuff, and newer ones have auto bed leveling. And but anyway, yeah, that's the video. These models are going to be up on my Gumroad page. I'll add a link to that. Additionally, there's an option on my Gumroad to you can give me a tip. You can give me a few bucks if you enjoyed this video. You don't have a 3D printer, or you don't care to, but you enjoyed learning all of this anyway. I'd appreciate it. Again, I spent all this time making these things, and just a person with a much bigger audience online came along and said, oh, actually, I'm doing the exact same thing and I'm taking all of the credit, and nobody cares because I have 1 million followers and you don't have any. So what are you going to do about it? Well, this is what I'm going to do about it. I'm going to undercut your entire business. Do you want to pay $100 for a flute from him, or do you want to pay $5 for one from me? and then just print the thing yourself. Yeah, that's what this video is. Okay, thanks for watching.